Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're heading way back. Think ancient Egypt, but before the pyramids, before those famous pharaohs. It was a different place then. Fragmented, lots of warring tribes.
Yeah, it's hard to even picture it like that, isn't it?
Okay.
How does a place so divided with such different groups actually become this powerhouse civilization that lasted for millennia?
Exactly. It seems like such a monumental leap. What kind of force, what vision could possibly bind all that together?
It's a huge question. It's not just about winning battles. It's
Yeah.
about building something shared, a common identity where there wasn't one before.
Right. And that brings us to our figure for today, Narmer. He's this really enigmatic character right at the start of the early dynastic period.
Widely seen as the guy who unified Egypt, the founder of the first dynasty.
So for this deep dive, our mission is to dig into what we know. We'll look at ancient artifacts, archaeological finds, even the debates scholars have, to really try and grasp his role in forging this nation. Ready to unpack Narmer.
Let's do it.
Okay, so before Narmer steps onto the scene, Egypt is basically two lands. Our sources are pretty clear on this. You've got Upper Egypt in the south.
Right. Symbolized by that distinctive white crown and associated with the vulture goddess Nekbet.
And then down in the north, in the Fertile Delta, you have Lower Egypt. Totally different symbols, the red crown, the cobra goddess, Wadjet.
And these weren't just, geographical markers. They were separate cultures, separate powers. They clashed quite a bit. Skirmishes along the Nile were common.
So life was very local, very fragmented. The idea of one single kingdom stretching all the way. That must have seemed like a pipe dream.
Absolutely. Just an impossible dream for most people then, you'd imagine.
But the sources also kind of hint that maybe the seeds of something grander were there, starting to sprout, even in that division. What does the archaeology actually tell us? Was there anything suggesting unification was even possible?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It wasn't static. You had these centers of power growing, becoming more complex. Trade networks were expanding, slowly connecting these areas more than before.
Okay. So larger chiefdoms were starting to emerge, gaining resources, influence.
Exactly. So there was this kind of underlying shift happening. It created an environment where maybe a strong leader could pull things together, capitalize on those growing connections.
Which leads us right back to Narmer. But who was he exactly? I understand his very identity is a hot topic among Egyptologists.
Oh, definitely. There's a big debate. For ages, the traditional story was Menes was the first pharaoh, the unifier.
Right, Menes is the name you often hear first.
But now, most Egyptologists lean towards Narmer and Menes being the same person, though, there's still a minority view that maybe Menes was Narmer's successor. Hor-Aha.
And the confusion stems from the names themselves, right? Narmer is his Horus name, the one we find on artifacts from his time.
The royal title found on his Serek, that palace facade symbol.
While Menes is a personal name that pops up much later in things like king lists compiled centuries afterward.
Exactly. Trying to match a contemporary royal title with a later personal name across that time gap, it's tricky.
So what specific evidence really pushed the needle towards Narmer Menes?
Or a key piece is the Abydos seal impression. It actually shows Narmer's Serek symbol alternating with the hieroglyph M.
MN, as in like an abbreviation for Menes.
Precisely. It strongly suggests a connection, maybe even an equivalence, between the two names, though of course scholars debate the exact interpretation.
Okay, but then there are those necropolis sealings, found relatively recently, right? 1985 and 1991?
Yes, in the Royal Cemetery at Abydos, these are huge. They were found in the tombs of later First Dynasty kings, Den and Ka.
What would they show?
They list the kings of the First Dynasty. And crucially, the Ka ceiling lists all 8 kings, in order, starting with Narmer.
Narmer first, followed by Hor-Aha, and so on.
Exactly. That's considered really strong evidence. It puts Narmer right at the beginning of the dynasty, making him the most likely candidate for the legendary founder Menes. It gives us a solid archaeological footing.
Okay, makes sense. Now, speaking of his name, Narmer, how is it actually written in hieroglyphs? And what does it mean?
It's written with 2 signs. A catfish, which is pronounced Anor, and a chisel.
Catfish and chisel.
Yeah, it uses the rebus principle, pictures representing sounds. As for the meaning, well, there are a few ideas. Fierce catfish, maybe stinging catfish or raging catfish. There isn't one single agreed-upon translation.
Raging catfish, I like that.
It's certainly evocative. And interestingly, you see the full 2-symbol name on formal things like stone palettes or official seals. But on pottery or maybe rock carvings, it's often shortened to just the catfish sign.
It really does feel like detective work, doesn't it? Piecing together this foundational figure from these scattered ancient clues, like a cold case that's thousands of years old.
That's a great way to put it. And new finds can still shift our understanding.
But maybe the most famous clue, the one piece of evidence that just screams Narmer and unification, has to be the Narmer palette.
Oh, absolutely. Found by Quibel back in her Acropolis, late 1890s. It's not just art. Many see it as a genuine historical document carved in stone, a siltstone palette used ceremonially.
And the imagery is just incredible. Let's break it down. One side, you've got Narmer, huge, imposing.
Towering over everyone else, yeah, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt.
And he's in that classic pose, right? Smiting an enemy really emphasizes the conquest aspect.
Definitely. And you see the Horus Falcon there too, leading captives, symbolizing divine approval or involvement.
Then you flip it over and now Narmer's wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt.
Right, he's inspecting rows of decapitated enemies. It's a pretty graphic statement of his dominance over the north.
And then there are those, what are they? Serpoparts. Mythical beasts with long, intertwined necks.
Serpoparts, yeah. That's a really fascinating image. Their intertwined necks are widely interpreted as symbolizing the unification, the binding together of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. Though, like many symbols, the precise nuance is still debated.
But the overall message seems pretty clear. Unity achieved through power. And isn't there also an image of Narmer as a bull?
Yes, smashing through city walls, trampling a foe. It's a powerful symbol of the king's raw strength, his vitality, his ability to overcome opposition.
So this palette seems like a clear record of unification. But I understand there's been some debate, whether it's literal history or more symbolic.
There has been. Initially, it was taken quite literally. This depicts the event of unification. Then some scholars argued, well, maybe these are more like stereotypical scenes of kingship, representing the king's duty to maintain order, defeat chaos, rather than one specific battle.
A general statement of royal power.
Sort of, yeah. But then more evidence came to light. Remember Ginter Dreyer's discoveries at Abydos?
Right, you mentioned a year label was found in 1993.
Exactly. A small label, likely attached to goods, used to date a specific year of Narmer's reign. And what does it depict?
The same event as the Narmer palette.
The very same scene, essentially, smiting the enemy. And since these first dynasty year labels identified years by the king's name and a major event of that year.
That makes it much more likely the palette is recording an actual historical event.
Precisely. That discovery really swung the pendulum back. The dominant view now is that the palette does commemorate a specific, significant historical achievement by Narmer.
And there's also the Narmer mace head, right? Another ceremonial object.
Yes, another important piece. It shows Narmer, enthroned, overseeing a ceremony with captives and vast amounts of plunder. The inscriptions boast incredible numbers.
I saw those numbers: 400,000 cattle, over 1.4 million goats, 120,000 human captives. Even if those are exaggerated, they paint a picture of massive conquest and resource accumulation.
They really do. It underlines the scale of his victories and the impact they must have had. Together, the palette, the label, the mace head. They build a compelling case for a defining, commemorated event.
It's amazing how you can read these objects, how scholars piece together the story from the art and inscriptions.
It's a constant process of interpretation and reinterpretation based on the evidence.
So the palette shows this decisive victory, but the reality of unification was probably messier, right? More drawn out.
Oh, almost certainly. It wasn't likely one single battle and boom, Egypt is unified. It was probably a long game.
Involving what? Politics, alliances, maybe sporadic fighting over years?
Exactly. Political maneuvering, maybe strategic marriages, ongoing conflicts. It could easily have spanned generations. Some evidence even suggests his predecessors, kings like Ka or Ari-Hor, had already started unifying parts of the country.
So Narmer might have been the one who finished the job, who consolidated everything.
That seems to be the picture emerging. He was the one who completed the process, the one who made it stick. And it was clearly a huge deal to him.
Yeah, you mentioned he commemorated it multiple times. Palette year label, cylinder seal, the Narmer boxes.
Right. He really emphasized it. And for later Egyptians, looking back, it seems like history proper, the history of their unified kingdom, effectively started with Narmer. Earlier rulers sort of faded into myth.
Okay, so internal consolidation was key. What about looking outwards? Did Narmer have a foreign policy?
He certainly seems to have. Remember that later historian Manetho? He wrote that Menes made a foreign expedition and won a renown. Many scholars connect that statement to Narmer and campaigns into Canaan, modern-day Israel, and Palestine.
And is there archaeological proof of that? Egyptians in Canaan during his time?
Yes, quite a bit. In fact, the Egyptian presence in southern Canaan seems to have peaked during Narmer's reign. We find these royal name symbols, the serex, on pottery there.
And a lot of them are Narmers.
A significant number. Out of about 33 early Egyptian serex found in Canaan, something like 20 belonged to Narmer. That's way more than for the kings before or immediately after him.
Wow. So what was the nature of that presence? Was it just trade or something more?
That's another debate. Trade was definitely important, increasingly so, but some evidence points to more. Fortifications built in an Egyptian style, like at a site called Tel II.
Suggests maybe a military angle too.
It does. And we also find pottery in Canaan that was actually made in Egypt from Nile clay, and conversely, pottery made in Canaan, but in an Egyptian style.
Which suggests more than just traders passing through, maybe actual Egyptian settlements or colonies.
Exactly. It points towards a more sustained presence, possibly Egyptian communities living there, perhaps overseeing trade routes or resources.
Fascinating. Now let's bring in another figure. Queen Nithotep. Who was she?
She's believed to have been Narmer's queen, and possibly the mother of his successor, Horaha. Her name was found associated with Narmer and Horaha, particularly in her large tomb in Nakata.
And her name itself, Nithotep. Nith is satisfied. That's significant, isn't it?
Very significant. Nith was the main goddess of Sais, a major city in the western delta part of Lower Egypt that Narmer conquered.
So a marriage to a princess or noblewoman from the conquered north, a classic political move to cement the unification.
That's the prevailing theory. A strategic marriage to help bind the two lands together. Her tomb being in Nakata, in Upper Egypt, also makes some think she might have originally come from the southern elite herself, maybe descended from earlier rulers there. It's complex.
But her status is somewhat debated now, too, based on recent finds.
Yeah, some rock inscriptions found in the Sinai Desert back in 2012 by Pierre Tallet have raised questions. They might suggest she was actually a regent for a later king, Dir, rather than Narmer's wife. So her exact position is a bit fuzzy again.
Still, even with the debate, she's potentially the earliest woman in history, outside of myth, whose name we actually know.
Which is pretty incredible when you think about it. A real person from over 5,000 years ago.
And finally, Narmer's own tomb. Where was it found and what did we learn from it?
It's in the royal necropolis at el-Kab in Abydos, the burial ground for the earliest kings. His tomb consists of two main mud brick chambers, B17 and B18, right next to his predecessor Ka and his successor Horaha.
Must have been heavily looted over the millennia.
Oh, completely. Pillaged repeatedly. But excavators, starting with Flinders Petrie way back, and more recently the German Archaeological Institute, have still found important things. Fragments of inscriptions, seal impressions, tools, pottery.
Anything else unusual about his burial complex?
Well, there's the interesting theory about his funerary enclosure, these large walled structures near the tombs. There's a big unidentified one called the donkey enclosure. Unlike other First Dynasty enclosures, it doesn't seem to have had subsidiary graves, burials of retainers sacrificed to accompany the king.
And Narmer's actual tomb also lacked those subsidiary graves.
Right, which leads some to speculate that maybe the donkey enclosure was actually Narmer's funerary enclosure. It's a neat connection, though still a theory.
And overall, his presence is felt far and wide, isn't it? You mentioned inscriptions found all over.
It's remarkable. We have nearly 100 inscriptions bearing his name, found at over 25 different sites throughout Egypt proper, down into Nubia, across into southern Canaan, out into the Sinai, even mentions in the western desert oases. It really shows the extent of his reach and influence.
It all weaves together, doesn't it? The palette, the seals, the tomb, the foreign contacts, the queen. It creates this rich, if still debated, picture of his reign.
Absolutely, a complex picture of a pivotal time.
When you step back, Narmer's unification, it feels like arguably the single most important event in all of ancient Egyptian history. It's the starting point for everything else.
I think you could absolutely make that case. It ended centuries of division. It launched the era of the pharaohs.
He didn't just stitch together lands, he created the very first centralized state we know of there, and established that whole concept of divine kingship.
Right, the idea that the ruler wasn't just a leader but a god on earth. That was foundational.
And that double crown he's shown, wearing the shent, combining the white and red crowns, that's the enduring symbol of what he did, the unified power he created.
And that unification, that consolidation of power and resources, it just laid the groundwork for everything Egypt became famous for. The monumental building projects like the pyramids, the complex religion, the sophisticated administration. None of that happens without the unified state Narmer forged.
It's truly mind-boggling. The actions of this one figure, shrouded in so much mystery over 5,000 years ago, literally shaped one of the world's greatest ancient civilizations.
His legacy is immense, even if piecing together his actual life is still ongoing work.
So that's Narmer, the visionary who looked beyond the divisions, the conqueror who imposed order, maybe the silent architect of a civilization that still captures our imagination thousands of years later. We've walked through the divided land he inherited, wrestled with who he actually was, tried to decode his incredible palette, and trace the echoes of his reign.
And it really hammers home how much of our knowledge comes from interpreting these fragments, these scattered clues. It's like this giant historical puzzle.
Yeah, and every new find, every little inscription could potentially shift the picture, rewrite a piece of the story. Makes you wonder.
What else is still out there, buried under the sand? What other ancient firsts, what other pivotal moments are just waiting to be discovered and maybe change our understanding of history all over again?
That's the perfect thought to leave things on. Until our next deep dive into the past, keep questioning, keep exploring those hidden histories.